It's in the name.
Welcome into the Helping Healing Humor with Ben and Travis podcast. We're being joined by Will Myhan from the road, but it's good to have him. We're going to talk a little bit about the Less Than Perfect Day and then something about music that Ben said, International Music Day, which if you're listening to this on the Tuesday, October 1st, those are right on the day. And we'll talk a little bit about that after a message from these important sponsors. This episode of the Helping Healing Humor with Ben and Travis podcast is presented by Faulkner University. Faulkner University is a private Christian liberal arts university based in Montgomery, Alabama, with a mission to provide an education anchored by not only intellect, but also character and service. The Faulkner experience aims to educate the whole person. Every individual matters every day. We all want to become better versions of ourselves. No one wants to remain trapped where they are because of missed opportunities and unrealized dreams. At Faulkner University, we believe your dreams don't have an expiration date. We understand that you're looking for more than a degree. You want to find your niche and thrive in your career. Whether you're a high school senior just beginning your trek or an adult student looking for a better path, Faulkner is here to help guide your journey. Go to faulkner.edu to apply or get more info. That's faulkner.edu. I'm Travis Creasy. That's All Pro Counselor with 3 Chord Counseling in Muscle Shoals, Alabama. He's also the pulpit minister at Highland Park Church of Christ in Muscle Shoals, Alabama. Ben, what's going on? How are you?
Well, I'm doing good. It is raining outside in most of the country at the time that we're doing this because of Hurricane Helene. Is that right? Is that how they're saying it? Hurricane Helene. We, of course, have our thoughts and prayers with all those who've been affected, because I know by the time this airs on Tuesday, there's still going to be a lot of people who are probably struggling with some things with that, both at the beach and up into Georgia and Tennessee and other places. So thinking about you guys, but other than that, I'm doing pretty good. And by the way, we have Will Myhan with us, who is the youth minister at Highland Park Church of Christ with me. He has put up with me all the time. How you doing?
Doing well. I'm sitting in a hotel in North Carolina, because you would have thought hurricane would have been worse in Alabama and like Georgia, but the interstate that we drove on is now I-40 is in the middle of a river somewhere. So
all that,
yeah, we're trying to escape. We drove 9 hours through what I assume Noah felt, when the flood started, and but we made it, so we're safe. Doing a Walk for Water event up here, trying to raise money to dig wells all over the world. So it's good to be sitting in a nice, dry hotel room.
So yeah. Are you guys still doing that tomorrow? I mean, are they still going to be able to have it?
Oh, yeah. It is 85 degrees and sunny today. I mean, it was just like the past 2 days we caught all the, whatever they call it, the eastern side where it's coming off and it's just wind and rain.
I got you.
Yeah, no, now everything is sunny, feels great outside, and it's actually looking to be a perfect day. So
cool.
Yeah.
You guys should have gave me the memo. I could have put on my Walk for Water shirt, but y'all left me out on that memo. But we're talking a little bit about, and we've kind of already got a jump start on the Less Than Perfect Day on October 1st. I wonder why they picked October 1st. I have no idea, but nonetheless, we live mostly less than perfect days, I would say, in this life. And so at some level, we all have to learn how to cope with days that are less than perfect. Now, there are those days that are catastrophic, things that we will remember all of our life, traumatic things that all people experience at some level. And then there are those days where it's just you can't tie your shoes, or maybe you can't get that part of your hair to lay down. Or if you're like me, both. And it can oftentimes be hard to even walk a straight line or put one foot in front of the other. And so, when you string a bunch of those together, it can be daunting. And I know in our last episode, we talked about how, what to do when life gets difficult, and certainly talked about taking breaks. But, when it's less than perfect, Ben, what are you going to fill us in? Help me and Will get through a less than perfect day.
Well, I'm sitting here thinking about that phrase anyway, and the truth is they're all less than perfect. I don't know that I've ever had a perfect day. I mean, we say sometimes like best day ever, but the reality is there's probably a spectrum in there. Like, there's going to be every day, there's going to be at least one or two little hiccups, something that happens. Maybe you've had a perfect day at some point, but I think most of them are less than perfect days. So I don't know if this is just exactly what's meant by the phrase, but I think that's the thing to keep in mind is that there is always going to be something every single day. One of the things that I heard on another podcast a long time ago, and I may have shared this before, I'm not sure we've talked about it on here, but it was kind of talking about how marriages need to find that reset button sometimes. And the idea that, I don't know, you guys might know this. We can be going to Disney World, or we could be going to the beach, or we could be going to some great restaurant or something that we're so excited about. And then you get in that one little twinge of an argument before you get in the car, with your kids or with your spouse, or something happens. And then it like affects the entire day. It's one argument as you're getting into the car, and the 6-hour drive is like on silent or something, and it's almost like it ruins the whole day. And I think that's the key to not having a bad day or a terrible day, is to be able to find a reset button to say, okay, look, that 5 minutes stunk, but I'm not going to let that 5 minutes control the rest of the day. I'm not going to let that make the outcome of the day bad. And so I think the key is understanding that you can have bad moments, but they do not have to turn in to a bad day. And there's other things, that you can focus on and think about that'll kind of help you with that.
Y'all want to know the definition for a less than perfect day? I mean, this is probably something we should have looked up prior to getting on and talking about it. Although you pretty much nailed it. But less than perfect day is a day dedicated to celebrating the benefits of not being perfect, and encourages people to embrace their flaws, learn from mistakes, and embrace their unique qualities. It promotes self-acceptance and encourages individuals to see the beauty of or in imperfection, which I think some of that we obviously can get on the train. Being Christians, there may be some of that we have to kind of hash and go through the weeds, or just ignore the weeds altogether. We could do that too. But no, to your point, I mean, that is one of the difficulties of coaching and ministering and being mentors, or being husbands, in fact, is kind of not letting it become a string of bad. As a coach, you're going to have moments that aren't great. And it's keeping those moments from snowballing into something that is worse. And I think, I don't know that Nick Saban coined the phrase or whatever, but, don't waste the failure. Don't waste a coming up short. There's a lesson to be learned. As long as you learn the lesson, it's not a failure. Failure is not final. Whatever cliche you want to throw out there. But, we are imperfect, but we can use those imperfections. There's a way to kind of get those, you think about the nervous butterflies, if you can get them all to like fly in the same motion, that you can use those things. Will, got any thoughts?
Yeah, I think one of the things for me in dealing with maybe the failures, or even accepting where I'm at in life, or just a day that doesn't go as planned. And this sounds so, like, the irony of it sounds really, really dumb, but it's like, I try not to plan every single thing that's going to happen in a day, because a lot of time that just sets me up for failure, like from the get-go. It's like, I want to be prepared, but I don't want to have like I know people that have every single minute of their day planned, and when it doesn't go to the T, like they lose all control, because they can't control every single minute of every single day. And so it's like, I try to live life more on the side of being prepared versus planning out every single moment. Because I've been there before, and I've tried to plan, as a husband and as a father and in ministry, to go, here's exactly how this trip is going to go. And then within 3 minutes of getting 35 to 40 teenagers on the road, you're like, this is not going to go even remotely close to how I thought it was. We're in North Carolina, and I've got one of our youth group guys with me, and we pick up a box truck. We're picking up 1,200 Magi boxes tomorrow to take back to Nashville. And so we get in this box truck. It's nice. It rides good. It starts pouring down raining, and it's just leaking, And so we're just having water. It's like the CYC video. Water's just pouring in on my arm and on my leg. And it's like that could have ruined the next 9 hours. Or we can just go, you know what? We knew this was a possibility because every minister vehicle that's ever existed is terrible anyway. And so we're just going to roll with it. But I do know people that the moment that would have happened, it would have derailed everything.
Yeah.
And so it's just trying to, I'm not saying go into life just all willy-nilly and just free. I work hard and be prepared. But sometimes before we even get into an environment, we've already set ourselves up to fail because we feel like we try to control every single bit of it. And that's, I guess part of that just comes from the older I get, realizing, hey, there's just a lot of curveballs that life's going to throw, and you're just not always going to be able to handle every single thing the way that you think it should go. And so that's always on those days. It's
the old Christmas vacation trap, right?
Yeah,
vacation is going to go this way.
Yeah. I mean, it's stepping back, taking a breath, and going, hey, it didn't go the way I thought it was. That's okay. I think it'll work. I was telling Parker earlier, we were talking about some of the older youth group members that are getting engaged and getting married. And I was telling him the morning that I proposed to Lindsay, I went and picked her up, and she got in the truck and she goes, I feel awful, and this is going to be a terrible day. And I'm just sitting there going, oh no, like this is the
She didn't know the half of it.
Right. This is the day that I've been stressed out for the whole week. And you get up and go, I feel awful. It's raining, and I really don't want to go to Nashville today at all. I'm going, we've got to go. Like, there's a bunch of stuff booked that we've got to do. But, you sit back and you think back after everything's happened, and it wasn't as bad, as probably what we thought it was in the moment. And
she did get stuck with you for the rest of her life.
Yeah, so. That may not somehow tricked her into. I got the better end of that deal big time. So,
well, I'll take the flip side of that, and where I am currently at the ripe old age of 43, is I have zero expectations of anyone, and so like I try to balance that with the more scriptural approach of, everyone is flawed. Everyone is going to make mistakes. Everyone is not their job to meet all of your expectations, especially when they're incredibly unreasonable. And so I kind of battle that with having kind of low expectations. I mean, I'm really always impressed when people do get something right, namely me. When it does work out, I'm like, that's awesome. And I give the Lord praise, but there's also that other side that's like, and it's hard to balance that, and I kind of put it this way. I shake my fist at the sky for not being the color blue I think it should be, or the shade of blue. And so that's a real thing. And so a lot of times when I'm dealing with teenagers and they're kind of, being sourpusses on the day, I'm like, hey man, you should enjoy this right now. And I'm by no means one of those guys that would tell you the best days of your life is in high school. No way, no how. Or middle school. I had way more fun in college, but it is perspective, and it's a good reminder. Right now, everything that's going on in my world are all really small inconveniences, and as I said on the last episode, those can build up certainly. But you think about the people who are dealing with the hurricane or fill in the blank of other litany of really big team trauma, devastating events, and so many of them are doing it with joy in their heart, and it's like, man, to suffer well is the phrase that I've kind of been thinking of over the last couple of months, to suffer well. But that starts with being able to deal with the little inconveniences.
I was thinking earlier, I guess my answer was like, the less than perfect day and, from the standpoint of a day that's less than perfect. But I think also part of this is celebrating that you're less than perfect, or that, like flaws that you may have, or whatever those things may be. And thinking on that term, I think of a couple of different things I learned, I guess, way back in the day with Lonnie when I was working with him. And we've talked about before, ideal versus unacceptable. You've got the things that are just ideal. This is the way I want the day to go. This is the way I want to look. This is the way I want to feel. This is the way I want the race to go. This is the way I want the game to go. That's the ideal. And this is unacceptable. This just can't happen. I'm not going to quit, or I'm not going to whatever. And usually most days and most situations lie in the middle of those two things. If they get to the, unacceptable version, I'm ready to go. Okay, look, we can't do this. This isn't right. This is wrong. This is not the best thing. And if it gets to ideal, then great. But most of the time, it's not either of those things. And it's somewhere in the middle of that spectrum of there's good parts of the day, but there were also rough parts of the day. But what did I do with those? Like you said, suffering well, or, what are some of the things I learned from it? How many times in the Bible does it talk about, the things that people learned from those mistakes that they made? It was Scott Goodwin at church the other night made a really great comment about Joseph. And he was talking about the whole, all the things that Joseph endured. And I've thought about those 1,000 times, but at some point he said, every one of those things felt like they were derailing the plans that God had. And every one of them were getting him closer to the plan that God ultimately had. It was like he doesn't meet the cupbearer and the baker if he's not in prison already. Because of this lie that was told about him, and he wasn't at that house if it wasn't for his brother selling him. It's like all those things felt like they were derailing, when in fact they were the very thing that were leading him where he was meant to be.
I was listening, kind of right what you're saying. I was listening to Bill Gaither, and he was doing an interview, he and his wife, and they were talking about how has your relationship with God grown. And Bill Gaither's wife said, well, I always tend to find God in the interruptions. And that's where my relationship with him has really grown, the most, which kind of goes right with Joseph. It's like, here's all of these things that stop what we believe to be the plan of our life. And in every single one of those, God's drawing you closer to what he needs you to be a part of. And I've always loved that thought of just, hey, whatever's happening God can use it. Am I going to allow God to use it? And I guess if I'm going to allow it, I've got to be okay with the idea of things can be a little uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. But I know God is working in a way that maybe I can't see at the moment. And so I find that really interesting that you mentioned that, and I just heard that not too long ago.
Well, the emotional intelligence is a muscle that must be exercised, and I think that's one thing that Will and your great youth ministry we can equip young people with. When you said 30 to 45, I was like, my goodness, a saint, people, a saint. But it's something that really has to be modeled. We can say it, you can explain what it is, but it's something that has to be seen. And unfortunately, it's either seen in what we shouldn't do or what we should. And I think the balance, the discernment to know when to say and what to say at the moment to get the most out of people. When I was playing football and we didn't have a great half, the coach would come in and almost rip the door off the handles and pitch a fit and yell and scream and throw stuff. And, the young people just don't respond to that anymore. They go in the tank, which once again, like, I'm not saying that's the best way to do it. It worked for us. But man, half the time I'm like, I need to go into sports psychology, like to motivate people And it's different motivations for everyone. I think that was one of the genius things that, if I can mention, Nick Saban said. And one time I heard him speaking, is he's like, that's the key, is learning what motivates some people, right? If you got a guy who's going to go in the first round, you motivate that guy with money. Like, if you do this really dumb thing, it's going to cost you money. The guy who just loves to play the sport, like, if you do this dumb thing, it's going to cost you the ability to play this sport. Going back to the Christmas Vacation reference, he's talking to his dad, and like, how did you do all this? And he's like, well, I had a lot of help from Jack Daniels, and certainly we as a podcast are not telling you that that's the route you should go. We would funnel you kind of in what both of you guys are saying, is that God has a plan. He has a purpose. And in one instance, him being victorious in the end cannot be derailed. Like, God wins, and he's going to win. Now, the beautiful part about that is he all invites us to the winning team, despite, and even oftentimes using our flaws, or what we might deem flaws. He can use those things to his glory. How many times does he kind of like give the Israelites a strategy, quotation marks, because none of us would look at it as a strategy, but they go and do it, and God gets the glory, because who wins a battle with trumpets?
Yeah.
And marching around 7 times, or throwing pots, jars down, and yelling a sword for Gideon and the Lord. And I don't know that any of them had swords, but they didn't need them. So,
yeah, I mean, you look at all of those things that, we've kind of put together in that. When we have our flaws oftentimes are our own strengths, and the scripture says it in the sense of, when we're weak, then we're strong, his power in us. But you've also got the idea of the things that, again, Lonnie has said, the things that make us vulnerable make us useful. The things that, it's in the bend of a knot or a rope that it's the weakest. But a rope that's not knotted or has a bend in it is not very useful, because, you've got to tie it off to something. You've got to put a knot in something. And so it may make it weak, but it makes it useful. And so there's a lot of things for us that, we go through those less than perfect days, or less than perfect, seasons in our life. Well, how many times have those created something fantastic, or brought about things that have, given us purpose? I listen to that podcast all the time, A Short History of, and the other one is Real Survival Stories. And in those real survival stories that you listen to, so many of them, they're like, after that event, I started doing this, and this for other people, or, volunteering with rescue because I got rescued by them, or I started, helping young people with disabilities because now I've, got a prosthetic leg. And so I've had to, learn things. And so I'm helping youth with that. And so there's so many times those things that were less than perfect days oftentimes become the very things that we are now using to help society in some way. And I mean, that's true for me in my story. I mean, I'm a counselor because of, what I went through in back in 99, September 23rd, just had the 25th anniversary of that event this week. And, I started counseling as a result of having to go to counseling from that event. So, and I think, Travis, you could probably say, I mean, this podcast was born out of, the fact that you had leukemia and the struggle that you had with that. This is kind of where we started this podcast from. So we can all kind of say, hey, there's some struggles I went through, and here's how now I'm using those.
I think it was you, Travis, that mentioned, thinking about when we go through difficult things, or maybe our failures, a lot of times those are so insignificant compared to what everybody else is facing, in various situations. And one thing that I would encourage people to do, that I've really tried, and not to put anything on Will here, but like, I've kept a running tab of prayer list on my phone. And every single week, I try to reach out to those people 2 to 3 times a week and just go, hey, I just want to check in and see where things are so I can change my prayer list or so that I can continue praying for something. And what that's done is to help me realize how great my days and my situation really is. And that's a very simple thing that every single one of us can do.
Yeah.
I mean, I would love to give millions and millions of dollars away to change people's lives. I just don't have it. The ministry side of things is not doing that. But every single one of us can pray, and we can check in on people. And that does more, I think, sometimes for us than even, well, I don't say he does more, but I think God can work on us just as much as he can work on the situation that we're praying for.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that has kept my mind probably more positive and more appreciative and more grateful to realize that even when things aren't going the way that I need them to, they're still going really, really good. And God is still doing a lot of great things in the life of my family and just in the days that I have. So just a challenge and a thought there that I think that's easy, that can do a lot to change the mindset and perspective, of who we are and what we're trying to strive for.
Hey, parents and young adventurers, are you ready to embark on an extraordinary journey? Introducing The Adventures of Ben and Travis and the Worry Coaster, a thrilling ride through the ups and downs of mental health in our new children's book. Join our dynamic duo as they navigate the twists and turns of their emotions while discovering the courage to conquer their worries. Pre-order your ticket to adventure now at benandtravis.com/books and be among the first to embark on this roller coaster of resilience. Let's turn worry into wonder and empower kids to embrace their feelings with bravery and hope. Buckle up. It's going to be an unforgettable ride. The good old-fashioned dislike podcast. Question of the day. Good old-fashioned dislike. Just a fun football rivalry. 3 to 5 minute podcast.
Always
we get to put out all of our angst against certain teams in the universe. And then we come to a conclusion who we're cheering for that week, which is just fun. We've had a lot of folks. Danny Morris, shout out to him. He's very kind to the podcast talking about football, even though he is one of those volunteers. But the question of the day, since it is technically CD Player Day and International Music Day, I guess the question will be, what song do you know all the words to that might shock people? Or maybe just an artist that you know all the words to that maybe somebody else would be kind of shocked. Ben and I know you and I both are lyrical people, right?
Yeah.
Like, people can say a phrase and it might be a old church hymn that dates back to the 1700s, or it could be, a country music song from the early 2000s. You just never know where it's going to come, or the Monkees or something like that. But, and you guys, well, I don't know if Will knows, but Ben has heard me rant and rave about Rascal Flatts. And to be honest, Rascal Flatts, I actually really enjoyed their music early on in their career, but after a while, it just started to drive me crazy. But I know a ton of lyrics from the Rascal Flatts band, and many of them I wish that I could forget. I would like to redeem that space in my head somewhere. But there are a lot of lyrics like that. So
yeah.
Feel free to answer those questions. I remember when that first CD player came to my house, I think it was my stepbrother's CD player, and he did not realize that him singing out loud while he was the only one that could hear the music was super annoying. So that's what I think about CD players and skipping.
So CD player, a CD that was probably, I don't know if it shocked anybody or not, but one of the first CDs that I probably wore out was the Aladdin soundtrack. So nice. I could literally,
I remember that.
I can sing every word, pretty much quote every word of the movie, because I watched it so many times and listened to that CD so many times. And so that one would catch people off guard. And then the fact that you would like throw in, I can quote, going the distance with Cake. Of course, I was in a band, so we played a lot of things. But everything from musicals, I can sing probably most of the Alexander Hamilton soundtrack. I know
so hard.
I know you're judging
so hard,
and I'm sure other people will. To like Green Day and Nirvana, to Aerosmith, to Toby Mac, to just about any genre on the planet. I think there's probably some artists that I could sing the whole song on, just because I like to listen to all of it. Will?
Yeah, I think there's like 3. Hamilton, the soundtrack to Hamilton was up there for me. I mean, that's one that I don't know.
Podcast over. Just ending the podcast. Never coming back.
I actually went to the cemetery where Aaron Burr is buried just last weekend.
Was he rolled over? Was he like face down?
It was actually him, his dad, and his father-in-law, or his grandfather. They were all buried right there together in Princeton Cemetery. So I don't think that very many people would think that I would do, Hamilton. I also love Queen. Queen is a really good. Parker, like Under Pressure came on earlier in the thing, and I was just jamming out. I was like, this is incredible. He's looking at me like I'm an idiot. And then, like, going back to the CDs, so my brother had a T100 Toyota truck, and he always made me shift the gears for him.
Not to be confused with the T1000, because that would be a different thing. But go ahead.
And so he always made me shift. And so what I remember, too, is I would have to shift for him. And he was trying to teach me because Dad said, I'm not going to raise 2 sons. They're not going to know how to drive, a manual vehicle. But he had all of George Strait's number ones. And I think I could still go back and sing. It was like 51 number ones at the time when I was coming through high school. And I think I could still sing at least 90% of those.
That makes up for it. All right. You're forgiven.
He's the king,
He's awesome.
He's the king. So that would be another one that I would, and 90s country, man. Blake and I put 90s country on. Youth group hates us, but.
So there's this kid in my class. So first period, I have all middle school boys. Every middle school boy in the school is in my first period class. And we're talking about judges right now. But anyways, there's this kid to my right. He's sitting there, and the kid in front of him's name is Emmanuel. And I said, Chris is an automatic. And Emmanuel's last name is Mang. And I was like, but Mang, he's Emmanuel. And woo, everybody in the room except one kid who grows up who's a farmer, and he giggled, and we locked eyes and we had a moment. But that's what I'm getting through the day on these days, boys. Mang, he's Emmanuel. Anyways, appreciate everybody listening. A good chance you're having a less than perfect day. Hopefully we haven't made it less perfect, but we probably have. But let's celebrate that, man. Let's celebrate it. And we'll talk at you again later.
Thanks for being with us for this episode of the Helping Healing Humor podcast. Be sure to download our free ebook, 28 Days of Focused Living, at benandtravis.com and receive all of our Helping Healing and Humor extra content directly in your inbox. We look forward to having you join us at the same Ben and Travis time, same Ben and Travis channel.